Since you brought it up, let's talk about sex.
Again. Yeah.
You managed to write a really dirty scene without writing anything dirty.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to write about sex? It's not hard to write about love.
No, but sex is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, mostly we're grateful nobody's watching. And I'm not sure that we're all as pyrotechnic as we think we are. I think the solution is comedy.
Yeah.
I think the way to write about sex is to understand that it's basically funny. You know, but that under the funny, there's feeling.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's very hard to write about is something you write about over and over and over, which is religion and religious identity. And what you read tonight, you were talking about a Christian and a Jew in a place where they're absolute minorities. And obviously in Satanic Verses, you wrote about Islam. Why this subject? So many people avoid it. Why you keep coming to it?
I don't know, it just feels like what's given, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, partly it's that if you grow up where I grew up, which was in South Asia, it sort of doesn't matter whether you yourself are religious or not. Yeah. Because all around you are these very powerful and very living religions. And if you're going to try and make sense of that in your work, you have to deal with it. You know, it would be ridiculous to leave it out because it's so much a part of all your characters' lives. Yeah. You know, and it's very hard to not face up to it. And it is very difficult if, like me, you're not at all religious. Because I don't have the kind of ease of dealing with it that a genuinely religious writer would have. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, if you're, I don't know, Marilyn Robinson, right. You know, you have a different relationship to the material. You know, if you're Nikos Kazantzakis, you know, you also do. But if you are somebody who has less religion than you could include on a chewed-off fingernail, you know, it's a bigger stretch. But that makes it interesting too. Right.
What draws you to it as subject matter? Is it the cultural phenomenon? Is it?
Well, it's partly that I thought it was dead.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you're the generation if you're the generation of the '60s, you know, yeah. I mean, you genuinely did believe that subject was dealt with, over and done with, gone, forget about it, you know, over. And boy, were we wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I've often thought that the problem of the '60s is that while we were having fun, you know, while we were inhaling, the uncool people took over the world. All the people that the '60s was not about, now in charge, including the kind of God Squad.
Yeah.
Which I must say, one of the revelations of the whole fuss about the Satanic Verses, one of the revelations was that there actually does exist this trans-religion kind of unanimity, so that after Mr. Khomeini's intervention, I was interested to see that he was basically supported by the Pope, by the Cardinal of New York, by the Chief Rabbi of Great Britain, all these people who presumably don't agree with Mr. Khomeini about the nature of God. But faced with what they saw as a challenge to God, they're all on the same team. You know? And that's not my team. My mother used to write to me to say that she prayed for me, and I said, would she stop, please?
That might have been the problem.
Yeah. I said, you know, that's not our side. And she said, why do you blame God? And I said, well, that's a kind of rather infantilized view of God. You know, if God isn't responsible for what people do in his name, then, I mean, what kind of a God is that? Right. You know, pretty feeble one. Anyway, yes. So I've had some reason to be engaged with this subject.
Yeah. The Moor's Last Sigh was the first novel that you wrote after Satanic Verses.
Yeah.
And you wrote it while in difficult conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought of it as my exile novel, because it's the only novel I wrote about India without being able to go there, which I wasn't at the time. And I was very scared about that, because all my life I wanted to not write outsider novels about India. I've not wanted to write the kind of novels that too many people have written, in which you show up in India and there's a Maharaja waiting at the railway station. It's amazing how many Maharajas there are waiting at railway stations for
writers.
Western blondes. Exactly, and writers. Anyway, I felt I felt that I would be embarrassed to feel that I had written such a novel, a novel which was out of touch and so on. And I think the best praise that I got for that novel was when friends of mine from India called me up and said, "You bastard, you snuck in here, didn't you? And you didn't come and see us."
Right.
And I said, "No, I didn't." And they said, "Well, how do you know all this shit?" I thought, okay.
Good.
Okay, didn't blow it then. And one of the things that gave me strength was that I know a number of writers who've been forced into conditions of exile, for much longer periods, actually. One of my good friends is a great Somali novelist, Nuruddin Farah. And there was a long period, well over 15 years or something, when Nuruddin could not go to Somalia because the then dictator of Somalia, Siad Barre, wanted to kill him. And now I think he has some difficulty going to Somalia because the new crazy people in Somalia, just Al-Shabaab, want to kill him. And yet, every book he's ever written has been set in Mogadishu, and I remember I said to him, how do you do that? Is it difficult? What do you have to do that? And he said, "It's okay, I have it here." And I think I felt that too. I don't know how long. I don't know that I could have done it for anything like the length of time that he had to do it, but I could do it once.
When you were writing the book, did you spend the whole time anticipating that people would be combing through it in search of something, or did it just not matter?
No, I didn't know. I mean, it was clear that there was a lot riding on the book,
Yeah.
And I had to put that out of my head to do it, really. But once it was done, yeah, I mean, there was obviously people who wanted to see if I was making trouble again, which I'm happy to say I was. Different kind of trouble, because that subject of Hindu fundamentalism was very vexed in India at the time.
Yeah.
And there was an attempt to ban the book in India, which we challenged in court and which failed, I'm happy to say. But there was a kind of weird desire amongst certain kinds of critics to declare that I had been irreversibly damaged by what had happened to me and therefore couldn't write anymore. I mean, there's a particular review which, how nobody remembers their good reviews, but everybody remembers the bad reviews, verbatim.
Yeah.
There was a review in England, never mind where, in which the critic said words to the effect that the fatwa had been a kind of laboratory experiment to see if a writer's talent could survive this degree of pressure. And he said, the evidence of this novel is that it cannot. So I thought, come over here and say that. But, there was that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There was that kind of thing. And I mean, I was in a way very delighted because mostly the book was wonderfully received. And it felt like a weight off my back. Yeah, it did feel like a monkey off my back.
And then Ground Beneath Her Feet went in quite a different direction.
Yes, and again, it puzzles. One of the things that's odd about writing a lot of books is that people expect you to write a certain kind of book.
Repeat
you know?
yourself, yeah.
And if you write that certain kind of book, then they say, well, he's repeating himself and he's not as good as he used to be.
Yeah.
You know? And if you don't repeat yourself, then they say, well, what's he doing that for? And it's not as good as he used to be. This is what we call the kind of Kakutani effect. But basically, the rule is you're not as good as you used to be.
Yeah.
Whether
Or you
do-
weren't so good in the first place.
Or you there's that. Yeah, exactly. P.S. Yeah, that's the kicker. Yeah. I was so pleased. Michiko gave me a good review for the memoir. It's the first good review I've had from her since Midnight's Children. So I had to live this log. From
So
1981 to 2012 for Michiko to like something I
Wow.
wrote. Thank you,
Yeah.
Michiko.
So let's talk about the memoir.
Yeah.
You kept diaries.
Mm.
You kept track of things that happened to you in those difficult years of your life. The memoir covers your whole life
Yeah.
up till
Yeah, but mostly that
2010.
thing.
How was it for you to write that? Was it a very different experience from writing your fiction?
Yes and no. I mean, what was different is that it was faster.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was talking to Martin Amis, who I know did one of these things, and about his memoir. And he said, yeah, he thought it was about twice as fast as writing a novel. And I think that's about so. And I think that's because so many of the things are given that normally are not given. I mean, you know the story.
Yeah.
You know how it comes out.
Yeah.
And you know all the major characters. You know, I've always thought, I've said this to students, that, you know, when you're writing a book, you have to answer for yourself, you have to answer a number of questions. You have to answer kind of what question, what story am I telling? And then you have to answer whose story is it, kind of who question. Then you have to answer the why question, which is why am I telling the story? You know? And when you're writing a memoir, you know the answer to all those questions.
Yeah.
And the only question that remains is the hardest question, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, which is how do you tell the story? And that you still have to find an answer to. And in that sense, it's not different to writing a novel.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if the people are real, it doesn't matter if the events really happened, you still have to make them live on the page. You have to make people care about the people whose story you're telling and the events that befell them and how it came out. You know, and in that sense, it's exactly like writing a novel. And I wanted it to be like, one of my sort of going in positions was to want it to feel like one of my books. I didn't want it to feel like a completely different kind of book that I wrote because something happened to me. I wanted it to feel like it could sit on the shelf next to my other books and sort of belong there. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted it to be novelistic. You know, and that's part of the reason for the third person thing. It's written in the third person. Because it allowed me to treat the character with my name objectively. You know, to write about that character like I was writing, the same way as I was writing about the other characters.
Now, these are people, not characters.
Yeah, but then up to a point, Lord Copper.
So you became a character. You became a third-person character.
I mean, I think you have to write, because I say in the book, they're characters. In the book, you have to make them live. It doesn't matter if these people really existed. To the reader, they're the people you present on the page. And they're either interesting or not interesting. They're either alive or inert. And you have to make them live, if you can. You know? And so you have to write about them as if they're characters, including the character with your own name.
Right. Who didn't actually have your own name.
Well, I
for a
had to
long
use
stretch
this.
of the book.
I mean, the reason for calling the book that, Joseph Anton, is just to dramatize how weird it is to be asked to give up your name. You know, I mean, what a strange thing it is. I mean, it's one thing for writers to use pseudonyms, which writers sometimes do. But to be told that in real life you must surrender your name for reasons which are not of your choosing. You know, that's. I just thought it would, and I hated it. I loathed that Joseph Anton thing. And the day that I was able to kill him, you know, and resume life without him was a good day. So there is a death in the novel, in the book.
Which is slightly sad because he comes from Conrad and Chekhov.
Yes, no, I'm in favor of Conrad and Chekhov. You know, I'm not.
Probably no one ever called Conrad Joe.
No, no. But actually, there was a thing which I remember, one of the birthplaces of it was a conversation I had with my dear friend Edward Said when he was fighting his cancer, you know. And I mean, Edward was a considerable Conrad scholar and wrote a lot about Conrad. And he had taken this line as a motto, this line from The Nigger of the Narcissus, in which the title character is dying of tuberculosis on this ship, and one of the other sailors asks him why he came aboard. You know, what did you come on the ship for? You knew you were sick. Why didn't you stay home? And he says this famous line, "I must live until I die, mustn't I?" And Edward took that as a kind of motto, and heroically did so. You know, taught, lectured, wrote, traveled. You know, was Edward Said until the moment that he could not be. And I thought, you know, do that. And so that's why Conrad.
Mm-hmm.
Chekhov, because Chekhov's good at loneliness and misery.
There are so many writers who fit that definition.
Yeah, but Chekhov is like the Chekhov of loneliness and misery.
Yeah.
You know how people are always being called, like Raymond Carver was called the American Chekhov and so on.
Yeah.
Well, Chekhov was the Chekhov.
The Russian Chekhov.
The Russian Chekhov. Yeah.
Did you start writing the book in the first person and then change?
Yeah. I started, I didn't like it. I just thought, shut up. and I remember calling my literary agent, Andrew Wiley, and saying, look, I don't know, I'm not liking this. I'm not liking the way it's coming out. And Andrew said what your agent's supposed to say, which is shut up and work, you know. So I went away and, I don't know, there was just a moment where I thought, let me see what happens if I tell it from one step away from myself, you know, as if I just step out of myself and look at myself. And wrote a passage, you know, and I thought, oh, feels better, you know. Mm-hmm. I just thought, I think I can do this. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't, you know, I'm not very theoretical as a writer. I don't sit there thinking about literary theory. I sit there thinking about what works and what doesn't work. And a lot of that is emotional and instinctive. It's just you do something, you think, oh, I don't like that, or you do something, you think, I do like that, you know. And afterwards, you can think about why. You know, I mean, now I can tell you like 20 reasons why it's in the third person. At the time, it was just because I thought it felt better.
Right.
You know, I liked it better.
I'm now on stage racking my brains to think if you've written fiction in the first person.
Yeah, Midnight Children.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know, I haven't, but it's different because that's an imaginary first person. That's an imaginary first person.
Yeah.
So he can say anything he wants.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me feel embarrassed.
You didn't tell him to shut up.
No, telling Salim to shut up, that's a bad, you know, impossible. The most garrulous narrator that I ever came up with. Yeah. Telling him to shut up would be a mug's game. Yeah. All you could do is hang on to his coattails and watch him run. You know?
But you haven't in a long time. You've stuck to third.
I can't remember, have I? I
forget. That I can think of.
No, well, I think one of the things that happened, this is a problem of becoming well known, is that people start looking for you in your books. People assume that there's an author character, you know, in there somewhere. And I wanted to make sure that people couldn't find that person. And I think so the answer to that is don't write in the first person. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wrote The Enchantress of Florence. People thought the Emperor Akbar was me. No, he was the Emperor of India. And he was like that.
Right, yeah.
No, it wasn't me. I wouldn't have minded being Emperor of India in the 16th century. It was a good gig. But I actually have told myself, you know, don't write books in which there's an authorial figure, which is a kind of stupid restriction in a way, because much wonderful literature has those characters. You know, you think Moses Herzog is quite close to Saul Bellow. I mean, Nathan Zuckerman is quite clearly and deliberately very close. But even before Nathan Zuckerman, Alexander Portnoy was not a million miles from Philip Roth, except for what he did in the bathroom.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. This is, the only witty sentence ever uttered by Jacqueline Suzanne. You know this? Because Valley of the Dolls came out much the same time as Portnoy's Complaint. And somebody asked Jacqueline Suzanne what she thought of Philip Roth. And she said he was a great writer, but I wouldn't want to shake his hand.
Fantastic. I think we've only got a little time now.
So we've come all the way
We've
back,
come
right?
back
We've
to
come back to
sex.
sex. Yeah.
We can take some audience questions, and I think if you put your hand in the air, someone will shake it with a microphone. There's one coming
Over here, somewhere.
Yeah, she's just getting the mic.
Yeah. All right.
Hi. So you're receiving the H.C. Andersen Award for Children's Book Writing in 2014. And I have a question, so in several parts. How do you go from the mindset of, writing about very adult things into writing children's literature? And that sort of what prompted you to start writing for children? And how do you research and investigate so that you can write for the audience of children?
Well, it's a series of very terrific questions, really. One thing I'll say about Hans Christian Andersen is that, and I'm very proud to be receiving that award later this year, because of my admiration for his work. But a lot of his work is not specifically for children. Some of the stories are very, very dark and adult. And one of my favorite stories of Hans Christian Andersen is his story, The Shadow, about the man whose shadow gets detached from him and comes back and kind of replaces him. And at the end of the story, the man is actually executed while the shadow marries the princess. That would be a scary story to read to your child. It's quite scary to read anyway. But I think the answer to your question about why did I do it was because I had children. That's why. And my older son, at a certain point, said to me, why didn't I write books that he wanted to read? And I thought, good point. And Haroon and the Sea of Stories came out of that. I tried to write a book that he would want to read. And then his younger brother said, where's my book? To which there are two answers. One answer is, kid, life ain't fair. And I thought that would probably be the wrong answer. The other answer is, write the damn book. So that's why. Two books, both motivated by two children. And I have to say, I'm very grateful to them because they're two of the most pleasurable things I've ever done for myself, I also got from my older son, Zafar, when I was writing Haroon, I got what I've always believed to be the best piece of literary criticism I ever received. When I'd written a couple of chapters, this may answer your research question. The research question is, ask a child. E.B. White, who wrote Charlotte's Web, famously said that you don't write down to children, you write up. Anyway, so I'd written a couple of chapters of Haroon, and I thought I'd better check, that it was okay, and if not, I was in deep trouble. So I showed it to him, and he read it, and I said, "What do you think?" And he said, "Yeah, Dad, it's good." I discerned a certain lack of enthusiasm, and I said, "Really? You think it's all right?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Dad, some people might be bored." He said, "Not me, of course, I'd read it. It's very nice, very good, but some people might be." I said, "What do you mean, some people might be bored?" And he said this very precise thing. He said, "You see, Dad, it doesn't have enough jump. Jump." And I knew what he meant. I thought, I can do jump. And so I grabbed the book and I took it home and rewrote these chapters with added jump. And then showed it to him again, and now with slightly more tension in my voice, asked him what he thought of it. And he said, yeah, Dad, now it's fine. And I thought it was just so good because, as anybody will tell you about the great editor will tell you the problem but will not tell you the solution. They will say, here, there's something wrong. And then you have to go find the solution. And that's exactly what he did. So he helped crucially. So they both did, actually. They both were the first readers of those two books, and they both helped. I wish there was a girl. I mean, my only regret about those two books is that they're both kind of boy books. And I feel that, I'm a sort of believer in the rule of three. There should be, if there's two of a thing, there should be three of a thing, except in the case of movies called The Matrix, in which case there should only be one of a thing. Or movies called Star Wars, in which case there should only be three of a thing, but not 6 or 9. But in general, the rule of three is pretty good. And so I've always thought if I could find a girl story, I'd like to have one of those to add to it.
We have a question over there.
Grimace, it seems, it's one of my favorite of your books, but it seems like it's substantially different than the rest. So what was the impetus behind that, or where did that story come from?
I'm so sorry you liked that book. My pathetic first novel. No, I mean, you're right that it's not like the others. And in my view, the reason it's not like the others is that I hadn't learned how to write. It feels to me, if I look at it now, which I try not to, it feels fitful to me. It feels like there are moments where I think, oh, well, that bit's okay. And then there are other moments of cringing embarrassment, which just feels like almost adolescent. Although I don't even have adolescence as an excuse. I was too old for that. The origin point of that is a Persian mystical narrative called The Conference of the Birds, which is an allegory comparable to The Pilgrim's Progress, I guess. And it's about a journey of the soul towards God, I guess. And the soul in question are these birds. In the poem, there are 30 birds led by a hoopoe who embark on a journey to the top of a distant mountain where there lives the bird god, the Simurgh, an anagram of Grimace. And they go through various valleys and peaks of ordeal. And when they get to the top of the mountain, nobody's there. And they're kind of annoyed at the messenger bird, the hoopoe, for having brought them through this very difficult journey to find nothing there. The entire poem turns on a play on words in the original Farsi, which is that the name of the bird god, the Simurgh, if you break it into its component syllables, si and murgh, means 30 birds. So it's that idea that having gone through the journey and arrived at the mountain, they become the thing they're looking for. And it's a beautiful poem, whether or not you're religious. It's a lovely idea that you become the thing you seek. And the novel's sort of about that. But I would strongly recommend you read The Conference of the Birds by Fariduddin Attar, which is better. And actually, as it happens, I hear Peter Brook is in the house somewhere. And Peter Brook, of course, very famously directed a stage version of The Conference of the Birds. So we have that in common.
You have one over there? Okay.
Yes, I have two comments that I'd like to make first, and then a question.
Yeah.
Okay, my first comment is what you said about Portnoy's complaint. My brother and I would not let my mother make a liver for dinner for months after that one came out.
Don't blame you. Yeah.
Okay. The second thing is you mentioned a character, and he said, I must live until I die. And being stuck in the house in this awful weather lately, I was listening to some music. and I have a CD of Sammy Davis. And there's a song on the CD, and the song goes, "I'm going to live, live, live until I die." Which is
Well, maybe
Sammy.
Sammy Davis read The Nigger of the Narcissus.
I don't know. The name of the CD, if anybody's interested in looking at it, is I've Got to Be Me by Sammy Davis. Okay, now my
That's
question is, this is my question.
Yeah.
I'm here with a group from my senior citizens reading class from Brooklyn College. Yes, we're all here. And a few semesters ago, we read Midnight's Children as one of our books. And I had read it long ago, and then we read it again for the class. Now, my question is this. You wrote a book that I like even better, and it was Shalimar the Clown. Now, would you like to comment for us on the difference in your state of mind when you wrote these two books?
Oh, I was much older when I wrote Shalimar the Clown. And it's a... Oh, yes. Tell me about it. But it's a... Well, they're very, very different kinds of book. Midnight Children is a kind of comic, historical allegory kind of thing. And Shalimar the Clown is a much... I think it's a more dark and tragic book, because I think it's about... well, it's in part about the tragedy of what is happening in Kashmir in the north part of India and Pakistan, and which is where my family originally came from. And so I felt I had that subject waiting for me, you know, and in a way didn't want to face it. It eventually did. I mean, the opening scene of Midnight Children takes place in Kashmir, so the books have a connection, and they both deal with Kashmir, but the period of Midnight's Children is certainly in that dimension much more innocent. I mean, that wasn't where the problem was then. I mean, I think one of the big differences is that the kind of manner of Midnight's Children is predominantly comic. I mean, sometimes it's pretty black comedy, but I think it's written with a kind of comic tone of voice, or a comedic tone of voice. And Shalimar the Clown is written more straightforwardly, as more straightforward, something very close to realism. I mean, there's one piece of what might be called magic realism in the book. But broadly speaking, I wanted to get things right. I wanted to write about this world and get it right. Which is quite difficult, because some of the book takes place in jihadist terrorist camps in the mountains in Kashmir, and I have not visited these places. It's quite hard to go there, actually, and especially if you want to return. And if you're the author of the Satanic Verses, it might be a little more complicated. But I still wanted to get it right, so I had to do a lot of digging and finding out. And I mean, it's one of the books in which I really valued what I learned from research, because I thought it gave me all kinds of riches that I would not have been able to make up. You know, so it's... I find that as I've gone on, I've done more and more research on my books, and I think they benefit from it. Other people may disagree, but I think certainly for me, it's given them a foundation in even if they take off into crazy places, it's nice to have a place to take off from, which is solid ground. And certainly in Shalimar, there's a lot of that. Not even in the jihadist part, you know. I mean, one of the main characters has a backstory of who becomes an American ambassador in India, but in his youth he's in Strasbourg in France at the time of the Nazi occupation, and he's Jewish, so he has to escape and so on. And I had thought, writing the book, that he would escape in the way that people did escape. That said, the French underground had a kind of escape routes that they got people out through. And I thought that would be the sort of method that he would use. And then I just by accident, by reading, found something much better, which is that there was just outside Strasbourg is the factory of the Bugatti motor car factory. And Monsieur Bugatti, Ettore Bugatti, got very upset that the Germans developed a plane, a Messerschmitt jet plane, which broke the world speed record. He didn't like it that the Germans had the world speed record. So he built a plane, which was called the Bugatti Racer, which was supposed to be faster than the German plane. And then France fell to the Nazis, and the Bugatti Racer never flew. The general view is that if it had flown, it would have been faster than that German plane, but it never did fly. But on the other hand, he managed to hide it throughout the occupation of France. The Nazis never got it. He hid it. And now, it's in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, where there's a museum of old planes, right? So it ended up there. But I thought, there's a really fast jet plane hiding out just around the corner from where my character needs to escape. And plus, it never really flew. But the miracle of fiction is, I can let it fly. And I can allow my character to escape in this plane. So in the novel, the Bugatti Racer flies in a kind of Saint-Exupéry kind of, vol de nuit sort of way. And there's no way I would have been able to make that up. That just came from the great delight of finding stuff out by reading about it. When I wrote The Enchantress of Florence, I've got this character of this girl moving across the world from South Asia towards Renaissance Italy. And there's a point at which she's going through the kind of Ottoman world. And I realized, reading about it, that even without faking the dates, at the time that she was passing through the Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans were at war with Dracula. Actually Dracula. And, Vlad Dracul, the Impaler. And I thought, without even cheating, I could have Dracula in my novel. And again, it was just a gift that showed up from research. And so I recommend research to you all. It allows you to make stuff up that you couldn't make up.
We can take one last question over here.
Hi, good evening, Mr.
gentleman.
Rushdie. Hi. You said a few minutes ago, in answer to a question over to my right, you talked about grimace, like, let's not talk about it. Right. But from the reader's point of view...
I'm glad you like it. No, really, please, tell your friends.
Sure. From the reader's point of view, grimace has a really important function.
Yes.
Which is it helps you understand shame, and it helps you understand Midnight's Children and Satanic Verses
really?
and The Moore's Last Sigh, so on and so on, yes. They all speak to each other. From our point of view.
I'm going to have to look at it.
So given that we now have the readers, that is, we now have Joe Anton's memoir. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good.
Yeah.
And now that you live here in the States, and since your novels are full of all the cultures that have passed through you and that you've had a relationship with, and yes, in Fury a little bit, but can we expect a
American
very
novels?
American
Well,
infused
Fury is
novel?
all American. I mean, the whole novel's in New York. Ground Beneath Her Feet, the whole second half of the Ground Beneath Her Feet is in, it's a different New York. It's the New York of 70s and, that New York Underground, all that stuff. But yes, I mean, the answer is yes. I mean, I'm writing a book now that happens here. I mean, it happens here kind of the day after tomorrow. But not really futuristic. It's just to be excused the present. So I don't have to have a mayor called de Blasio. And I could just invent a mayor if I want one. So it's just that. It's just a little bit not quite today, but otherwise it's quite recognizably here. Yeah. Except well, I won't say anything about it. But it's crazy. I mean, what I'll say about it is that it's as if, having spent all these 4 years, whatever, 3.5, 4 years, working on this memoir and really trying very hard to tell the truth as far as I could, I think that effort of telling the truth created a kind of reaction in me of wanting to go like way over here and make up crazy shit. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. It's a novel full of crazy shit. It's as fictional as I can make it in response to having done something which was as non-fictional as I could make it. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think the rest of it you'll have to, I don't know. I don't know what it's about. I have to wait and see. I'm about 1/3 of the way through it, so it's difficult to talk about it.
Yeah. Thank you, Salman.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.